Hey guys, it's Chris, and this is the first podcast episode I'm doing. So I've been doing a lot of these smaller kind of video blog-ish type content. Now I'm going to go into some longer format things because there's a lot of really challenging topics that we're coming across these days, specifically in real estate, specifically in life as human beings. So what I want to start with talking today is something we've been talking a lot about, and that's wire fraud and wire fraud prevention. So for those that aren't familiar, and if you're in real estate or you've been recently buying or selling, wire fraud and wire fraud prevention is a significant challenge for the industry. There were $9 billion lost in wire fraud related activities, whether that's business email compromise fraud, social engineering fraud, just wire fraud as a whole last year, according to the FBI. Estimates as far as $90 billion in attempted wire fraud last year. It's significant. The unfortunate reality for many of us is that this problem is going to get worse before it gets better. So for consumers who we as an industry have a responsibility to keep safe, right now, consumers have a 63% satisfaction rate with the process. So 62% of buyers, 64% of sellers are satisfied or very satisfied with the transaction. That number is not good enough. And so what happens, those are NAR stats, and what happens is, if you could imagine, those are the numbers as the whole ecosystem exists today. So that includes lending, that includes real estate, that includes title, it includes all of it. So what happens if consumers suddenly begin to understand that this wire fraud problem is getting worse and now their monies aren't safe? So as an industry, what happens if that number has a 4 in front of it? What happens if that number is a 43 instead of a 63? It's significant. And so for me, what I talk a lot about is, number one, why is this happening? So I'll go into detail about where this is actually coming from and why these things are happening. But then more importantly, are we creating a perfect storm for a platform like Opendoor or some of these iBuyers to come in who actually are building an end-to-end platform? Are we building a perfect storm as an industry where consumers are have lost confidence in what it is we do? And so now, when they're creating a platform where you can look for homes without a real estate agent, you can write offers with a discount brokerage that they own who rebate back 1.5 points at closing. You can make this process so frictionless for consumers. They also do lending at 0%, no fees for loans. They are doing all of it, and they're doing it title, and they're doing it all in an enclosed environment, which is much safer than the traditional space that we're all accustomed to. So my concern, and the concern I think for our industry, is what happens if that number has a 4 in front of it. Again, this problem is going to get worse. So just quickly kind of level setting as to why this stuff is happening and where it started from. I hear a lot of folks talking about wire fraud, but at a really high level. Nobody really, no, I shouldn't say nobody, but I think the industry is suffering from a little bit of it hasn't happened to me yet syndrome. And unfortunately, we're not talking about it enough because it's scary. And the other reason we're not talking about it enough is because if you're a title company and this has happened to you, if you can pay to make that customer whole, you're paying to make that customer whole. You don't want real estate agents to find out that you've lost money. Now, knock on wood, we haven't had that situation, but I know a lot of our competitors have, and they're just not talking about it because they're afraid. They don't want their real estate agents or their lenders, those folks who are referring them business, they don't want them to know that they've lost 10 grand, they've lost 25 grand, they've lost 100 grand. So, because you can imagine, if I'm an agent, I'm not going to refer you business if I know that you're losing consumers' monies. So they're keeping it secret. It's happening all over the place. It's significant, and we aren't talking about it enough. So I say, let's talk about it. Let's bring it out in the open. And so we're talking about it at a high level, but we're not getting deep enough. It's important to understand, in my opinion, where this stuff is being driven from and why it hasn't been stopped. Why haven't the FBI, why haven't the Department of Justice stopped it? Here's why it's so difficult. It's incredibly difficult to stop it because the majority of this has grown out of an extension from the Nigerian Prince email fraud scams that have been happening for a long time now. So there's a global fraud syndicate based out of Nigeria. And what they're doing is they're essentially operating as their own crime unit and operating with complete abilities to not be arrested because they're doing it outside of the jurisdiction of our government. And so they operate through middlemen. So in cases that have happened here, and even a case that happened in 2016 in the central Ohio area, there's a group, and in this particular case, there's a case that happened in Galena, Ohio. The family, the name are the Frederick family, and you can read about this, and there's a Columbus Dispatch article that's happened that goes into really good detail about exactly what happened. And so this Nigerian crime syndicate has a group of middlemen, and in this case, it was a group out of the Houston area. There's a Nigerian community there where they're operating as middlemen. In this case, operated as a middleman in creating bank accounts using fake passports, where once that bank account is opened, in this case particular, they went to a Chase branch and they opened up a bank account, and the title company wired seller proceeds, the Frederick's proceeds, to this bank account at Chase that was opened up with a fake passport. The title company did not do their due diligence in making sure that this was I shouldn't say it that way. The title company did the best they could at the time to do their due diligence, but unfortunately sent the money to the wrong place. And so once that money hits that Chase bank account, it's then routed via bank accounts in China, Hong Kong, South Africa, or in some cases now it's even being transferred and converted over into cryptocurrency. So once those monies are sent and become cryptocurrency, it's incredibly difficult to get it back. And then once it's in a bank in China, the United States federal government has no jurisdiction over that. So that's how they're getting their money back into their country. So these middlemen are getting caught. These middlemen are getting arrested. There's a gentleman right now sitting in a federal prison that has been charged in this particular case and is sitting in jail. But essentially, he was paid a few $1,000s to open up this bank account, and now he's been arrested. They're going to find someone else to do this. So these are happening. A lot of ways that they're getting access to real estate agents are through spoofed emails. So creating emails that look like an email coming from, say, National Association of Realtors, or creating an email that looks like it's coming from Netflix or coming from Dropbox or Google Drive. And so once they're able to collect your email and password, odds are most agents, there's 2 million licensed real estate agents right now, odds are most of them are using emails that aren't using two-step verification, or they're using passwords, the same passwords they're using through multiple accounts. So let's say you have a Yahoo account, and Yahoo in 2016 had 3 billion records stolen. If you're using that same Yahoo password on other passwords and other accounts, it's not that hard to gain access to and pretend they're now a real estate agent. The other thing they're doing is creating email accounts that look a whole heck of a lot like their buyers and their sellers. So they're able to infiltrate, they're able to get in to these transactions, pretend like they're buyers and sellers, pretend like they're real estate agents, pretend like they're title agents, especially working with buyers. Buyers are incredibly vulnerable right now. So it's a fairly sophisticated thing that's happening. These truly have begun and are an extension out of those like Nigerian Prince 419 email scams that we're familiar with. So This idea I think it's important to understand where and who are behind these fraud scams, and how hard and difficult it is to actually stop them. The reality is this is going to get worse. It's going to get worse before it gets better, unfortunately. We're here at World Class Title, we're using a product called SafeWire on all of our transactions. And one of the reasons for that is because it's important that our people are well trained to look for these frauds. But it's also important to use software and use technology that can authenticate that buyers and sellers are where they are and are who they say they are. So that's one of the reasons we're doing that. If you're a real estate professional, it's important to be vetting your title companies that you're working with. It's important to be vetting your lenders that you're working with. We see lenders sending unsecured documents, unsecured emails all the time with financial information of buyers. We got to knock it off. We just have to stop. And it's important that all of us are responsible to each other, and more importantly to our consumers, to lift the bar and create better experiences, safer experiences. So if you're watching this and you watched to this point, I hope the takeaway for you is, number one, to change your email password. Create a stronger, safer password. There are password managers out there. I use Dashlane. Dashlane is a great password manager that can give you the ability to create different passwords for different accounts. You don't have to memorize all of them. And that way, if someone hacks your password for one of your accounts, they don't have it for all of your accounts. So that's important. Secondly, set two-step verification and authentication on your emails, on as many accounts as you can, but especially on your emails. And what that means is if somebody is able to get into your email, they need a secondary code from another device. So a multi-factor authentication in order to get into your email. Super important. And, lastly, I'd suggest talking to your vendors, talking to your partners, and making sure that you're communicating clearly your expectations for your clients, your buyers, your sellers. Real estate agents have a ton of leverage in these transactions. And so if you're referring partners, it's important that these partners are doing their proper due diligence and have their proper safety in place for consumers. So ask them questions like, have you had successful wire fraud where your customer has lost money? What do you have in place to protect against consumers losing money? How are you sending secure wire instructions? Are you sending secure wire instructions? Talk about, and I'm going to do a whole other video about social engineering insurance, because this is another important one. You may have a cyber insurance policy. Your broker may have a cyber insurance policy, but a lot of these cyber insurance policies now have exclusions around social engineering fraud. So remember that insurance companies are in business to make money. They're not in business to pay claims. So for insurance companies, they exclude things that begin to cost them money. So when somebody hacks an email account, pretends to be you or pretends to be a party in the transaction, that's called social engineering fraud. Insurance companies are now putting social engineering exclusions inside of your cyber insurance policies. So it's important to make sure that your partners also have social engineering insurance. Alta, the American Land Title Association, did a study back in January that found 60% of title companies don't have cyber insurance in place. That's a problem. So asking, vetting, making sure that we're all responsible to each other to create a safer space for our consumers and increase this 63% number. Because if this number goes down, we are all at risk. So I hope I can be a resource for you, keeping your clients, consumers safe. Feel free, reach out to me if you catch this video. Reach out to me directly, chris@worldclasstitle.com, or put a note in the comments if you found any of this helpful. Hopefully, there are any other pressing concerns you have in and around this subject or anything real estate related. I hope that you'll reach out. Put it in the comments below. If you found value here, let us know. So, worldclasstitle.com, chris@worldclasstitle.com. Leave a comment, leave a note. Hope you all have a safe and great day. Later.